Get out of here, you beast! This is my family, my home, and I will defend it to my last breath. If you want to destroy everything, you'll have to go through me first.
Once upon a time, in a small, tranquil village nestled amidst the dense forests of the southern United States, there lived a revered couple named Jeremiah and Nia. They were known not only for their kindness and compassion, but also for a profound love as enduring and sweet as the gentle stream that flowed eternally through the heart of the woods. Yet beneath their seemingly blissful lives lay a quiet sorrow, like a shadow silently weaving its way through the leaves, haunting their days. It had been 12 years since their wedding, and Jeremiah and Nia had yet to be blessed with a child. Though their love remained unwavering, the absence of a child carved a deep void in their hearts. With each passing year, their longing grew more profound, like the ancient roots of a towering tree burrowing ever deeper into the earth. Every morning, the joyful laughter of village children echoed through the forest, reaching Jeremiah and Nia's modest home. But instead of bringing happiness, the sound felt like an invisible blade cutting into Nia's heart. She often sat quietly beneath the old oak tree at the edge of the village, where the rustling leaves seemed to whisper words of comfort. Under the canopy of this ancient tree, Nia prayed relentlessly, tears streaming down her face. She pleaded with God and the sacred spirits of the earth that she believed watched over them from the depths of the forest. "Dear Lord above," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, "if you can hear my prayer, have mercy on me. Just one child, not perfect, just a child to fill the silence in our home and in my heart." This humble village, with its simple folk and unwavering faith in the heavens and earth, had borne witness to many miracles over the years. Yet it seemed as though Nia's prayers went unanswered. However, those who passed by and saw her sitting beneath the old oak tree could sense the depth of her sorrow and the steadfast spiritual strength she carried, a resilience that few could muster. Each evening, as Jeremiah returned home from a long day's work on the farm, he saw the unfulfilled dreams reflected in his wife's eyes. "We must continue to hope, Nia," he would say, striving to instill faith. Yet deep within, a sense of helplessness crept into his heart, as though he could do nothing to ease the pain of the woman he loved more than life itself. Still, there was something about the forest surrounding their village, something profound and sacred, that kept Nia from giving up. She believed her prayers were not in vain. Perhaps only time would reveal the truth. And maybe, just maybe, the silence of the forest was cradling a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Every year when the small village deep in the forest held the naming ceremony for newborns, Nia always attended. She prepared small, delicate gifts, tying each bow with trembling yet devoted hands. Outwardly, she appeared cheerful, smiling warmly at the young mothers and cradling the newborns with a tender gaze. But within, each moment felt like a cold blade cutting deep into her soul. As the celebratory songs rang out, mingling with the joyous laughter of the villagers, Nia stood quietly in a corner, her eyes fixed on the babies held lovingly in their mother's arms. In the air filled with joy, she felt left behind, as empty as a cracked vessel. When the festivities ended and the crowd began to disperse, Nia's pain overwhelmed her. She slipped away from the gathering and returned to her small room. The door slammed shut, and the sobs she had suppressed all day finally broke free, echoing through the quiet space. Jeremiah stood outside the door, his hands clenched tightly, his gaze heavy with helplessness. He loved Nia more than anything in the world, but each time he saw her in such anguish, he felt powerless. He wanted to do something, say something, but every word seemed meaningless in the face of the profound sorrow Nia carried. That night, when Jeremiah entered the room, he found Nia sitting on the bed, her head bowed, tears still streaming down her cheeks. He approached her, sat beside her, and gently but firmly placed his strong hands on her shoulders. "Everything will be okay, Nia," he said, his deep voice warm yet tinged with emotion. "We have to believe that God has a plan for us. No matter how difficult this path may be, I will always be here, by your side." Nia looked up at Jeremiah, her eyes red and swollen from crying. But the faith that once shone in her gaze was gone. She shook her head softly, as if Jeremiah's words weren't enough to ease the pain gripping her heart. "Jeremiah," she whispered, her voice trembling like a breeze. "Are you sure God is listening to us? Or are we just whispers lost in the vastness of this forest?" Jeremiah didn't respond. He simply held her hand tighter, as if trying to pass all the strength he had left into her. The two of them sat in silence, with only the sound of Nia's sobs blending with the wind howling through the trees, a reminder that they were battling something far greater than themselves. Yet deep within Nia, amidst the pain and despair, a fragile ember of hope continued to smoulder. She didn't know if her prayers would ever be answered, but she knew she couldn't stop hoping, because hope was all she had left. One overcast afternoon, as Nia walked alone through the ancient forest on her way to the farm, her steps felt heavier than ever. The surroundings were eerily silent, with only the faint rustle of leaves accompanying her weary sighs. Her tear-filled eyes reflected her sorrow, and her frail shoulders trembled in the gentle breeze. Approaching a towering tree with roots sprawling like giant hands, embracing the earth, she stopped, her heart weighed down by an unspeakable pain. Nia knelt down, her hands clasped tightly together, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dear Lord, dear spirits of the earth," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I do not ask for perfection, even just one child, no matter how they may be, just to hold, love, and care for. Please do not abandon me." The forest fell utterly silent, the wind ceased, and the air seemed to thicken around her. Suddenly, from the dense canopy above, a gentle yet resounding voice echoed, a voice as if born from the very essence of the earth and sky. "Nia, daughter of the sacred land," the voice began, soft yet filled with authority. "Your prayers have been heard. Within a year, you shall be blessed. You will bear twins, 2 children who will bring both light and darkness to this village." Nia's heart seemed to stop. She looked up, her wide eyes filled with equal parts awe and fear. The voice continued like a melody carried from the spirits beyond. "Remember this. Their hair must never be cut. Should this warning be ignored, disaster will fall upon your family and the village." Frozen in place, Nia clutched the tree's roots with trembling hands, her chest pounding as though it might burst. Was this a dream? Or a divine message from the spirits who had protected the village for generations? She rose to her feet, her entire body trembling, but her eyes now shone with a fragile glimmer of hope. Nia hurried back toward her home, her steps crunching through the dry leaves, the only sound breaking the forest's profound stillness. When she arrived, Jeremiah was already there, his face full of surprise at the sight of his wife, breathless and glowing with urgency. "Jeremiah," Nia exclaimed, gripping her husband's hands tightly, "God has heard my prayers. The spirits of the earth have answered. I will have children, we will have twins. But we must swear, Jeremiah, their hair must never be cut." Jeremiah furrowed his brow, his eyes clouded with concern and skepticism. "Nia," he said slowly, "perhaps your desperation has led you to imagine this. I know how deeply you long for children, but that voice may have only been in your mind." Nia met his gaze, her tear-streaked face filled with unwavering determination. "Jeremiah," she said firmly, "this was no imagination. I know what I heard was real. We must believe." Jeremiah sighed, his hand gently stroking her shoulder, though doubt lingered in his eyes. Yet Nia remained undeterred. Her heart had been ignited by the sacred promise from the forest, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, her faith would be the guiding flame. True to the promise of the Earther spirits, a year later, Nia gave birth to 2 beautiful baby boys. The entire village erupted in joy, for this was not only a blessing for Jeremiah and Nia, but also seen as a sign of prosperity and good fortune for the village. The twins were named Eli and Jonah, 2 brothers who, from the moment they entered the world, displayed distinct qualities as contrasting as the sun and the moon. On the day of the naming ceremony, the village came alive with laughter, chatter, and vibrant colours. Villagers from all around brought small gifts and heartfelt blessings for Nia's family. At the heart of the celebration, Eli and Jonah rested peacefully in their mother's arms, their curious eyes taking in the world around them. Nia gazed at her sons, her heart melting with love. She whispered softly, "My precious angels, you are the greatest gift I have ever received." As the first years of their lives passed, Eli and Jonah grew up surrounded by the boundless love of their family and the village. But despite being twins, their differences became increasingly apparent, as striking as the bright sun and the still shadows of the same sky. Eli, bold and full of energy, was a natural protector of those around him. His eyes sparkled like fire, and his every step radiated confidence. No matter the challenge, Eli faced it head-on, as if driven by an invisible force. During games with friends, he never hesitated to step in if someone was being bullied. "Eli is our hero," the village children would often cheer, filling Jeremiah and Nia with immense pride. Jonah, the younger twin, had a quieter demeanour. Intelligent and resourceful, he always thought carefully before acting. Jonah enjoyed sitting silently by the window, observing the world with a sharp, discerning gaze. However, within Jonah, a quiet jealousy began to take root. He couldn't help but notice the attention Eli received, the admiration, the praise, and the adoring glances. "He's always the centre of everything," Jonah thought, a flicker of rivalry flashing in his eyes. Though he tried to smile when Eli was celebrated by the villagers, deep down Jonah felt overshadowed, left behind in the overwhelming glow of his brother. As time passed, the contrast between the two brothers became even more pronounced. One was like a blazing fire, bright, radiant, and full of passion. The other was like a silent stream, flowing quietly, but with depth and mystery. The villagers adored both boys, but their differences weren't merely unique traits. They seemed to hint at dramatic events looming on the horizon. That afternoon, sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of the ancient forest, casting shimmering patches of light on the ground. Eli and Jonah were engrossed in their play at the forest's edge, their laughter echoing through the tranquil air. But amidst the joyful sounds came a low, chilling growl, deep and menacing. The boys froze, their wide eyes darting around in search of the source of the eerie noise as, from the shadows of the underbrush, a wolf emerged. Its filthy grey fur stood on end, and its glowing yellow eyes burned like twin torches in the night. It advanced slowly toward the brothers, baring sharp teeth and growling steadily, as if daring anyone to stand in its way. Jonah stood paralyzed for a moment before letting out a panicked scream and turning to sprint back toward the village. But Eli didn't move. He stood firm, his small feet planted like roots digging deep into the earth. Though his heart pounded wildly, Eli showed no fear. His gaze locked onto the wolves, sharp and resolute. Without hesitation, Eli bent down and grabbed a long branch from the ground, gripping it tightly in his hands. When the wolf lunged, Eli swung the branch with all his might, striking the wolf on the snout and forcing it to recoil in surprise. "Go away!" Eli shouted, his young voice ringing out with a commanding authority that couldn't be ignored. The wolf growled again, but as it stared into Eli's blazing eyes, it seemed to recognize that this boy was no ordinary opponent. After a moment's hesitation, the wolf turned and retreated, its footsteps fading into the depths of the forest. When Jeremiah and Nia arrived in a panic, they found their son standing amidst the dappled light of the forest, his face calm but his eyes burning like twin flames. The branch in Eli's hand was snapped in two, and a few drops of blood on the ground were the only evidence of the encounter. "Eli!" Nia cried out, rushing to embrace her son. Jeremiah stood behind her, exhaling deeply in relief, though he couldn't hide his astonishment and pride at Eli's composure. Still clutching Eli's shoulders tightly, Nia whispered through her tears, "This is the child chosen by the earth." The promise from years ago echoed in her mind, a sacred reminder of the destiny foretold. Jeremiah placed a hand on Nia's shoulder, his gaze fixed on Eli, the boy standing tall, his eyes radiant and alive with an unexplainable energy. A mix of pride and worry swelled in his chest. He realized that his son wasn't just brave, but possessed a strength that even he couldn't comprehend. Yet deep within the forest where the shadows lingered, another pair of eyes watched silently, as if fate was preparing to deliver an even greater challenge. While the village celebrated Eli's heroic act, the cheers and praise seemed only to deepen Jonah's silence. He sat curled in a corner of their home, his eyes fixed on Eli, the beloved hero of the village. "Eli, the village's champion," Jonah muttered, his voice tinged with a hint of bitterness. His heart felt suffocated by a growing sense of abandonment, overshadowed by the bright light of his brother. Day by day, Jonah's jealousy smoldered like a hidden flame. To him, the long hair, a symbol tied to the sacred promise, was no longer a mark of pride, but a chain of confinement. "Why must I keep this hair?" Jonah questioned himself. "I don't want to live in Eli's shadow anymore." One day, Jonah mustered the courage to step into his father's room. Jeremiah sat by the window, his gaze distant as it lingered on the far-off forest. "Father," Jonah began, his voice unexpectedly resolute, "I want to cut my hair. It has bothered me for a long time." Jeremiah looked up, surprise flickering across his face before it gave way to concern. He remembered the sacred warning from the spirits. The hair of the two children must never be cut. "No, Jonah," he said firmly but gently. "We can't. You know the promise made to the sacred land." But Jonah refused to back down. "Father," he said, his eyes glowing with defiance, "this is my hair. It's my choice. You've always taught me to be strong and independent. This is my decision." Jeremiah stared into his son's determined eyes, where stubbornness and resolve shone unmistakably. His heart grew heavy. As a father, he didn't want to deny his child something he so deeply desired, but the weight of the sacred promise pressed heavily on his mind. After a long, tense silence, Jeremiah reluctantly agreed. As the scissors sliced through Jonah's locks, the atmosphere seemed to shift. Each snip sounded like a death knell. When the final strand fell to the floor, a sudden chilling sound echoed from the forest, a noise unlike the wind or the cries of wild animals, but rather a haunting whisper rising from the earth itself. Outside, the sky abruptly darkened, though the sun had yet to set. A cold wind swept through the village, rattling wooden doors with eerie creaks. The air grew heavy, as if an invisible shadow was creeping through every home. Jeremiah placed a hand on Jonah's shoulder, his eyes fixed on the forest's edge. A shiver ran down his spine, but he said nothing. Jonah stood still, gazing at the fallen hair on the floor. He felt a sense of relief, yet a subtle, inexplicable unease rippled through his mind. The villagers, absorbed in their daily routines, noticed nothing strange about the shifting air. None of them heard the chilling sound from the forest or realized it was an omen of looming calamity. But Jeremiah knew he could feel it, and deep down he asked himself, have we just broken the sacred promise? Just days after Jonah's hair was cut, an unexpected calamity befell the village. On what began as a peaceful morning, while the villagers were busy with their daily tasks, a thunderous roar echoed from the forest, shattering the calm. In the distance, the enormous figure of a massive bear emerged, its red eyes blazing with fury. Its matted fur was streaked with dried blood, and its roars seemed to channel pure rage as it stormed toward the village. The bear charged straight into Jeremiah's farm, smashing through wooden fences and destroying everything in its path. Panic-stricken screams erupted as villagers fled for safety, seeking shelter wherever they could. Jeremiah and Nia stood frozen under the eaves of their house, their faces etched with worry as chaos unfolded before them. Amidst the pandemonium, Eli stepped forward, his eyes burning with unshakable determination. "Eli, no!" Nia cried out, her trembling hands reaching to stop her son. But Eli only turned to her with a reassuring smile. "I can't let it destroy everything we've built, Mother," he said resolutely. Before anyone could stop him, Eli grabbed an old spear leaning against the livestock pen and sprinted toward the massive beast. The battle began. The bear roared ferociously, swiping its razor-sharp claws at Eli. But the boy didn't flinch. With agility and bravery, Eli dodged the attacks and thrust the spear into the beast's side. The bear let out a deafening roar of pain, its fiery eyes blazing even brighter with fury. A fierce confrontation unfolded. Eli, small but resolute, stood his ground against the monstrous creature, each strike of his spear infused with strength and conviction. From a distance, Jonah watched in silence, his fists clenched and his heart pounded erratically. In that moment, Eli was no longer just a brother. He was the embodiment of courage, a force of nature Jonah had never been able to match. But as Jonah stood there, a heavy guilt began to weigh on him. What have I done, he thought. If it weren't for my jealousy, would this disaster have happened? After a grueling struggle, Eli finally cornered the bear. With one powerful thrust, he drove the spear through its chest. The bear let out one final roar before collapsing to the ground, its life fading away. But victory came at a cost. Eli staggered, the spear slipping from his grasp. A deep gash ran down his arm and shoulder, blood soaking through his shirt. "Eli!" Jeremiah shouted, rushing to catch his son as he fell. Nia sobbed uncontrollably, cradling Eli in her arms. "My child, are you okay?" she cried, her tears mingling with the blood on his face. Jonah approached, his legs trembling. He looked at Eli, his brother now lying exhausted in their parents' embrace, yet his eyes still shone with pride. He did what I never could, Jonah thought, regret flooding his heart. "Eli," Jonah whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry, I was wrong." Eli, however, simply smiled faintly, his eyes closing as his breaths grew shallow. Despite his weakened state, there was a calmness, even a sense of fulfillment, radiating from him. In the small, dimly lit room, the faint glow of an oil lamp flickered on the walls, casting shadows that danced like restless spirits in the somber darkness. Eli lay motionless on the old wooden bed, his breathing shallow and laboured, each breath a heavy sigh. His wounds were carefully bandaged, but blood seeped through, staining the fabric in a dark crimson. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying an eerie reminder of the bloody battle that had just unfolded. Jonah stood at the doorway, his legs feeling weighed down by guilt. He had never felt so small. The image of Eli standing firm against the monstrous bear, his eyes blazing and his spirit unyielding, haunted Jonah. He risked his life to protect us, and I just stood there, consumed by my own darkness. Stepping into the room, Jonah moved hesitantly, each step trembling under the weight of his remorse. He knelt beside the bed, clasping Eli's cold hand in his own. Tears streamed down his face, dripping onto the old blanket. "Eli, I'm sorry," Jonah whispered, his voice choked. "I was wrong. I just wanted to be loved by our parents the way they love you. I never thought things would go this far." His voice cracked, words catching in his throat. "I was jealous, Eli, but I never imagined you would. That you would get hurt like this to protect us. I was selfish. I don't deserve to be your brother." For a moment, the room fell silent. Jonah bowed his head, his shoulders shaking as though the weight of his regret was crushing him. Then a weak voice broke the stillness, soft but strong enough to shatter the silence. "Jonah." Jonah's head shot up, his tear-streaked face full of shock. Eli's eyes had opened, and a faint but warm smile graced his lips. "Jonah, I've always loved you. You're my brother, and nothing will ever change that." Those words washed over Jonah like a gentle breeze, clearing away the storm of guilt and shame within him. He looked at Eli, his eyes wide with astonishment and emotion. "You're not angry with me?" Jonah whispered. Eli shook his head slightly, his voice weak but resolute. "Family is everything, Jonah. We don't need to be the same, but we must always be there for each other. Don't let jealousy blind you anymore." Jonah broke into sobs, not out of pain this time, but from a sense of release. He bent down, gripping Eli's hand tightly as if never wanting to let go. Outside, the oil lamp's light flickered faintly, but within Jonah's heart, another light began to shine, a light of forgiveness and the unbreakable bond of brotherhood. As time passed, Eli's wounds gradually healed. Not only his physical scars, but also Jonah's heart. The days Jonah spent caring for his brother by the bedside became a journey of redemption. He realized that his jealousy had caused pain, not just to Eli, but also to himself. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, Jonah stood before the small mirror in his room, his eyes fixed on his short hair. "It's time," he whispered. This wasn't just about growing his hair back. It was a new promise, a symbol of atonement and respect for the sacred prophecy. From that day forward, Jonah stopped cutting his hair. As it grew, it became a new emblem of the bond and loyalty between the brothers. Eli, with his warm smile, placed a hand on Jonah's shoulder. "I'm proud of you," Eli said. "Together, we'll make this village a better place." From that moment, the two brothers became an inseparable team. Despite their differences, they learned to complement each other. Eli, with his courage and strength, was the first to stand up in the face of danger. Jonah, with his intelligence and ingenuity, devised plans and strategies to protect the village from the threats of the wild forest. The villagers continually expressed their gratitude to the brothers, calling them the protectors. They brought peace and prosperity to the village, not just through their actions, but also through their spirit. Jonah's story of jealousy and redemption became a profound lesson for everyone, that unity and love can overcome any hardship. One evening, under the light of the full moon, the villagers gathered to celebrate the autumn festival. Jonah stepped into the center of the circle, holding a small lute. He began to play a gentle melody. Eli sat nearby, leaning against an ancient tree, his eyes glowing with pride as he watched his younger brother. "We've faced challenges that once seemed insurmountable," Jonah said, his voice resonating through the night. "But love, forgiveness, and unity have made us stronger than ever." The villagers nodded, their eyes glimmering with understanding. They knew that the strength of their community didn't lie in individual efforts, but in the unity of everyone. Under the soft glow of the moon, Eli and Jonah stood side by side, shoulder to shoulder, gazing toward the distant forest. Though the village was at peace for now, they knew that greater challenges lay ahead, but this time they were ready to face them, together, armed not only with their own strength, but also with the love and support of an entire village behind them. Under the full moon, its gentle light illuminated the crystal-clear river, painting a serene scene like a work of art. Jeremiah and Nia stood side by side, quietly watching their two sons, Eli and Jonah, playing along the riverbank. The boys' carefree laughter echoed, blending with the soft murmur of the river, creating a harmonious melody of life. Jeremiah let out a sigh, not one of exhaustion but of peace after the storms they had weathered. "The promise of the sacred land brought us many challenges, but also countless blessings," he said, his eyes reflecting gratitude. "No matter how hard it got, we endured. And do you know why?" Nia looked at him, her gaze as gentle as the moonlit river. She took his hand, their fingers interlocking. "Because we have love," she said softly, her voice warm yet firm. "It's love that guided us through the darkest days." Jeremiah nodded, his eyes returning to their sons. Eli and Jonah were no longer just children. They were symbols of courage, forgiveness, and hope for the future. Yet, behind the tranquility of the moment, an unspoken unease lingered. Jeremiah shivered slightly, sensing that their family's trials were not yet over. In the distance, from the shadows of the forest, a pair of glowing eyes watched silently. The eyes neither blinked nor moved, as though waiting for something. The wind rustled through the treetops, carrying an eerie whisper. None of Jeremiah's family noticed the presence of the lurking darkness, a silent reminder that peace is never eternal. So, has this story truly ended, or is it merely the beginning of a new chapter? The story of Jeremiah, Nia, Eli, and Jonah is not just about challenges and victories. It's a reminder that love, unity, and perseverance can help us overcome any adversity. Even when we face seemingly insurmountable difficulties, love remains the guiding torch, illuminating the path forward, even in the densest darkness. Life's trials are not endings. They are opportunities to learn, grow, and cherish what we have. Sometimes, darkness appears not to frighten us, but to test our courage and patience. If this story has touched your heart, please like and share it with your friends, family, and loved ones in the United States. Don't forget to subscribe to our African Tales Best channel to hear more inspiring stories. Every interaction helps us spread positivity to the African American community, preserve cultural values, and share meaningful lessons and stories that can change lives.